What if the most misunderstood book in the Bible was actually the one telling the truth we all secretly know? Ecclesiastes isn't hopeless, it's honest. It doesn't hide from the hard questions. It stares into the fog of life and hands us a lamp. This isn't just ancient wisdom. It's a guide for every soul who's ever whispered, "What's the point?" Step into the book that dares to be real and discover the quiet beauty waiting behind the vapor. The curtain pulled back on a restless world. This isn't your typical wisdom book. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't give easy answers. It stares into the void and dares to speak from it. But what if the seeming despair of Ecclesiastes is actually the beginning of deep, liberating truth? There's a book nestled within the Old Testament that doesn't feel like it belongs. It doesn't open with divine thunder. It doesn't close with a call to hope. It opens with smoke and ends with a whisper. Ecclesiastes begins by declaring, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. And for many, that's where they stop, dismissing the book as a depressing outlier, a poetic grumble from a weary old king. But what if we've misunderstood it entirely? What if Ecclesiastes isn't a lament to be avoided, but a mirror we've needed all along? This is not a book of despair. It's a cry of honesty. It strips the glitter off human existence and exposes the aching question beneath. What's the point? It dares to say what so many of us think in quiet moments when the noise fades. Is this all there is? And that's where its beauty begins. Unlike other books that immediately point to heaven, Ecclesiastes starts where we actually are, on the ground, in the dirt, in the ache of routine, aging, injustice, toil. It doesn't rush to give answers. It makes us sit with the questions. Traditionally attributed to Solomon, the book reads like a journal from someone who had everything: wealth, wisdom, pleasure, achievement, and still found his soul wanting. "I have seen all the things that are done under the sun," he says. "All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind." It's not cynicism, it's clarity. And it might just be the most prophetic diagnosis of the modern world ever written. Because we live in a culture that offers more than Solomon ever dreamed, yet we too are restless, burned out, disillusioned. We've built towers of technology and pleasure, but still cry in the quiet. And Ecclesiastes leans in and says, "I know. But here's the twist. The book that begins in darkness doesn't leave us there. Like a spiral staircase descending into shadow, it eventually turns, slowly, subtly, toward the light. Not with neat platitudes, but with something far more sacred: awe. Fear God and keep His commandments," it concludes. Not as a lifeless rule, but as a quiet invitation. After all the chasing, all the noise, all the striving, it calls us to stop, to recenter, to remember that life isn't found in outcomes, but in reverence. Ecclesiastes is not the book you turn to for motivational slogans or prosperity formulas. It's the book you read when life punches you in the gut, when the dream didn't work, when the applause faded, when you did everything right and still ended up empty. It speaks not just to kings, but to all of us: the worker, the mother, the student, the aging, the brokenhearted. It speaks in the voice of someone who's tried everything and now wants to help you see what actually matters. So this isn't a story of despair. It's a story of unmasking, of peeling back the illusion to find something deeper than happiness, wisdom, humility, sacred fear. And that's why it's not depressing, it's liberating. Because when we stop pretending that life always makes sense, we're finally free to meet the God who does. A voice that echoes through every season. Ecclesiastes doesn't ask for our attention, it demands it. It confronts us not with theology from a throne, but with reality from the ground. And in its tension, it dares to name what we all feel, but rarely voice aloud. Beneath the poetic refrain, "Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless," lies a man wrestling not with a lack of belief, but with the weight of belief in a broken world. Ecclesiastes is not the cry of an atheist, but the soul-weary prayer of a believer who has seen too much. Its author, often attributed to Solomon, stands at the crossroads of extraordinary wisdom and sobering reflection. He's tasted wealth, pleasure, learning, and legacy, and finds them all fleeting under the sun. That phrase, under the sun, appears nearly 30 times, and it's not filler, it's a key. Ecclesiastes is looking at life as it appears without heaven's intervention, without eternity, without resurrection, without a divine rescue. It's raw, disenchanted, real, but in its honesty, it strips away our illusions and readies us to receive truth that goes deeper than comfort. The book exposes the fragile scaffolding we build our lives on: achievement, control, status, routine. The preacher sees through it all. He doesn't deny that these things can bring moments of joy, but he exposes that they cannot hold the weight of our souls. Time devours everything. Death comes for kings and beggars alike. Wisdom is better than folly, but even the wise die. He laments this, yes, but he doesn't lie to us, and that makes his voice holy. Ecclesiastes is also deeply countercultural. In a world addicted to productivity and happiness, it pauses. It invites mourning. It affirms frustration. It doesn't offer easy answers. It gives sacred space for mystery and paradox. The day of death is better than the day of birth, it declares, not because death is good, but because it sobers us into wisdom. It is better to go to a house of mourning than a house of feasting. Why? Because that's where we remember what matters. One of its most radical teachings is this: live well within limits. We are not gods. We are not invincible. We cannot master time or guarantee outcomes. So what do? Eat our food with gladness. Love our spouse. Do what our hands find to do. Rejoice in our work. Not because it lasts forever, but because it is a gift for now. In the age of endless self-optimization and control, Ecclesiastes dares us to surrender. Not to apathy, but to humility, to reverence. Fear God and keep His commandments, the book concludes. For this is the whole duty of man. That's not a rigid demand, it's a freeing realignment. When we see that life isn't ours to master, we're finally free to live it deeply, gratefully, honestly. And woven through the cynicism, there are subtle threads of grace, glimpses that there may be more beyond the sun. That judgment will come, and therefore justice matters. That joy is real, even if fleeting. That toil isn't wasted when it's done in reverence. Ecclesiastes never fully resolves the tension, but it points us toward a hope not rooted in this world alone. In this way, Ecclesiastes becomes a mirror, not to show us how to escape life, but to see it clearly, and to choose a posture that isn't naive, but faithful. The book doesn't end with despair. It ends with awe, and awe, when faced with a God who sees all, judges rightly, and gives meaning beyond the grave. That awe is the beginning of wisdom. Smoke, shadows, and the search for substance. Ecclesiastes doesn't give us clean symbols or sharp lines. Instead, it paints in smoke. It whispers in paradox. It dares us to find wisdom not in control, but in surrender. The Hebrew word that defines Ecclesiastes is hevel. It's traditionally translated vanity or meaningless, but the word carries a deeper, more poetic essence. Vapor, mist, smoke. Something that appears solid but slips through your fingers. Something real but fleeting. Something seen but never grasped. This isn't nihilism, it's realism, cloaked in metaphor. Every symbol in Ecclesiastes emerges like a shape in the fog, real, but not fully tangible. The mist becomes a character itself, enveloping every pursuit. The search for wisdom, like trying to catch the wind. The chase for pleasure, smoke. Wealth, smoke. Even time itself slips through our grasp. And in that imagery, we are meant to feel the fragility of everything under the sun. But not all symbols are despairing. There are glimmers, fragments of clarity that pierce the haze. Take the phrase, "A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." It's buried in chapter 4, often used at weddings. But in its context, it's about companionship, not romance. In a world of mist and uncertainty, relationships become a quiet resistance to isolation. They anchor us to what matters. Then, there's the ever-turning wheel of time in chapter 3. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to weep and a time to laugh. These aren't just poetic lines. They form a liturgy of human experience. Every gain is countered by loss. Every celebration eventually bends toward mourning. It's a rhythm, a pulse, not meant to frustrate us, but to reframe our expectations of control. We are not sovereign over time. We live within it. One of the most haunting symbols is the fate of both humans and animals. All go to the same place, the preacher says. All come from dust, and to dust all return. He's not denying God's sovereignty. He's naming our mortality. He's reminding us we are not the exception to the rule. And strangely, that humbling truth becomes a doorway to worship. Even the temple itself, a symbol of sacred encounter, is absent in Ecclesiastes, replaced instead by warnings like, "God is in heaven, and you are on earth, so let your words be few." This isn't distance, it's reverence, a return to mystery. In an age where people demand clarity from God, Ecclesiastes invites something deeper, awe in the face of what we cannot fully understand. The final symbol, the closing scene of the book, is one of decay. "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth," it says, before describing the body breaking down. Eyes dim, ears grow dull, bones tremble. The dust returns to the earth. It's a slow unraveling, but it's not despair. It's a call to awaken now, to live wisely now, to remember God before the fog becomes too thick. In that way, Ecclesiastes doesn't hand us answers. It hands us a mirror, not a mirror that flatters, but one that tells the truth. It doesn't reveal a God of easy comfort. It reveals a God whose holiness demands we live with open hands, not clenched fists, whose wisdom flows not from formulas, but from surrender. And most importantly, the smoke of Ecclesiastes prepares the stage for the fire of Christ. Its ache for permanence, its longing for justice, its hunger for resurrection. These are questions that only find their full answer in the gospel. Ecclesiastes empties us of false hopes, so the Messiah can fill us with real ones, living wisely in a world of vapor. Ecclesiastes is not a retreat from reality, it's an unflinching embrace of it. It doesn't ask us to run from the shadows, but to walk through them with wisdom in hand. This is what it means to live well when everything feels fleeting. If Ecclesiastes only stayed in the philosophical clouds, it would be easy to dismiss. But its wisdom is intensely practical because it's forged in the furnace of real life. The preacher isn't writing from an ivory tower. He's speaking as someone who has tasted everything the world can offer. Wealth, success, pleasure, work, religion, all of it. And what he offers us is not a theory. It's a roadmap for sanity in a world that constantly disappoints. First, Ecclesiastes teaches us how to hold success. In a culture that idolizes achievement, it reminds us, you can build an empire and still feel empty. The book doesn't say success is bad. It simply says it's not enough. So what do we do with that? We learn to hold our ambitions lightly, to enjoy our work, but not be defined by it, to plant and build and strive, but with the deep knowledge that none of it will last forever. That kind of humility creates freedom. You stop grasping for eternal significance in temporary things. You do your work faithfully, but you stop expecting it to save you. Second, Ecclesiastes reshapes how we engage with time. In the West, we are obsessed with optimization. Every moment must be productive. Every day must be leveraged. But Ecclesiastes whispers a different truth. There is a time to weep, a time to rest, a time to stop. The wisdom here is seasonal living. You don't rush through grief. You don't force joy. You learn to flow with life's rhythms instead of constantly resisting them. Ironically, that makes you more present and more human. Third, The book dismantles our illusions of control. We spend so much of life trying to manage outcomes. If I do X, I'll get Y. But Ecclesiastes says, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but time and chance happen to them all. That's not cynicism, it's permission. Permission to stop white-knuckling your life. To accept that you can live wisely and still experience loss. That the goal is not to master the world, but to trust the God who does. This has real implications for how we navigate disappointment. When the promotion falls through. When the marriage is hard. When the healing doesn't come. Ecclesiastes gives us language for the ache. It gives us space to name the fog. But it doesn't stop there. It gently shepherds us back toward hope. It tells us, you are not failing because life feels difficult. This is life, and still, there is beauty here. There's also a deep call to joy, but not the loud, plastic kind. Ecclesiastes speaks of joy in small things, bread, wine, friendship, light on your skin. These aren't trivial. They're anchors. In a vaporous world, gratitude becomes a form of rebellion, not because you're ignoring the pain, but because you're refusing to let it win. In this way, Ecclesiastes teaches us to celebrate, not when everything is perfect, but precisely when it's not. And then there's mortality. Most modern people do everything they can to avoid thinking about death. But Ecclesiastes brings it front and center, not to scare us, but to liberate us. Better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting, it says. Why? Because it reminds us of what truly matters. When you know your days are numbered, you stop wasting them. You stop chasing smoke, you slow down, you forgive, you speak truth, you love more deeply, you worship with reverence. You live like you know you're dust, and yet, you matter deeply to the one who made you. And that's the final thread Ecclesiastes weaves through its smoky pages. Fear God and keep His commandments. It's not a moralistic finale. It's a revelation. The point is not to live in fear of punishment, but to live in awe of a God who stands above the mist, a God who is not vapor but substance, not fleeting but eternal. The honest path to hope. Ecclesiastes doesn't tie everything up with a bow. It doesn't promise an easy life. But what it offers, if you dare to receive it, is something far greater. Clarity, courage, and a grounded faith that breathes through the fog. This is the wisdom that makes you real. By the time we reach the final verses of Ecclesiastes, something unexpected happens. After wrestling with life's futility, after acknowledging the endless cycles and unanswered questions, the preacher ends not with despair, but with reverence. Fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. This isn't a throwaway moral. It's the hidden heartbeat of the book. All along, the preacher has been chipping away at our illusions, that we can control our fate, that wealth guarantees peace, that pleasure fills the void, that wisdom is enough to outsmart death. But once all these false hopes fall away, what remains? Awe, humility, trust, a return to the God who stands outside the vapor, yet meets us in it. The message isn't that life is meaningless. It's that meaning is not where we usually look for it, not in accomplishment, not in legacy, not even in understanding. The meaning of life is found in the presence of God, and the fear of the Lord isn't about trembling at a tyrant, but walking in reverence before the one who holds all things together. Ecclesiastes doesn't just expose the futility of chasing the wind, it calls us to breathe deeply, the grace already here. This book gives permission to ask hard questions, to admit that we don't have it all figured out, that sometimes life doesn't make sense, and that's okay. God never asked us to be gods. He asked us to trust, to live wisely, to walk in awe. This has powerful implications for your life right now. If you're exhausted from striving, this book offers you rest. If you're angry at the world's injustice, it tells you you're not crazy. If you're numb or jaded or grieving or confused, it welcomes you with open arms. Ecclesiastes teaches us to build our lives not on fantasy, but on truth. And the truth is, you are not in control. You are not promised tomorrow. You are not the center of the story. But you are loved by the one who is. So what do you do now? You live, not perfectly, but attentively. You rejoice, not in what you own, but in what you've been given. You speak truth. You do justice. You eat your bread with gladness. You laugh louder. You forgive sooner. You live in light of eternity. You stop chasing smoke and start planting seeds. And when the days feel like vapor, you remember this. Even vapor glows when the sun hits it just right. That's the invitation of Ecclesiastes. Not to despair, but to awaken.